What's up, peeps? So I want to talk today about what you might call the difference between materialism and meaning. The difference between quantity and quality, between achievement of goals and enjoying the process. Let's talk about the difference between those two, and we'll talk about why I prefer one of them and recommend one of them over the other. The first one I'd call the quantity approach. And this is where all your goals and your intentions and your motives are aimed towards getting something in the future. So this might be what I'd call a finish line goal, to achieve something in the future, like get a promotion, get married, get a six-pack of abs, not beer. This kind of measurable milestone type of a goal. Or it could be something that, like the accumulation of a quantity of things, have sex with as many different women as possible, build up a huge number of dollars in the bank account, own lots of property, have a lot of power, this quantity that accumulates, and this kind of more is better kind of materialistic approach. That's one way of going about life, and it's the way I see most people going about life. They're either trying to cross a finish line in the future, or they're trying to accumulate a large number of either possessions or conquests, large number of achievements or measurable pieces of property in some way. The other approach is what you might call the quality approach. So this is where the process is all that matters. Being in the moment as it occurs is the measure of failure or success. It's about the experiential sensation, about meaning, connection. It's about how well you participated in the moment. Results are irrelevant. Whatever you keep or lose, it doesn't matter. It's how you kept it or lost it that matters. Whether someone stays in your life, whether they love you, hate you, whether you make money, lose money, all of that's irrelevant. What matters is how you did it, how you felt doing it, what you learned from the experience, how you grew as a person. That kind of qualitative approach. Did you live with integrity? Did you live by your values? These are the measures. Now you can see how these different approaches can often be contradictory and don't work very well together. Sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. But you can only really ever pursue one at a time. If I want to pursue having a meaningful moment of integrity, I have to let go of getting outcomes. It's very hard for me to maintain integrity if I'm trying to get something. Because if I'm risking losing that something by keeping my integrity, I'll be forced to choose between the two. They come into conflict. If I want to, for example, sleep with a lot of women, I may have to be dishonest to do it. I may have to be disrespectful to people who want to build a connection with me. I may have to disrespect myself. I may have to compromise my values to do it. Not always, but I may have to. If I want to accumulate wealth, I'll have to put aside certain experiences, like being compassionate and giving sometimes. When that wealth's just sitting in my bank account and I can see someone else who would appreciate it more and I'd feel good giving it to them. In order to keep that wealth, I'd have to sacrifice that opportunity to be giving and compassionate. Now, this isn't always the case. Sometimes you get to have your cake and eat it too. Sometimes me being honest and open and meaningfully engaged in the experience comes with external rewards. And sometimes my pursuit of an external reward, a finish line or achievement, also happens to involve living by my values. So sometimes they do align, but at any given time I'm only ever focused on one. I'm either trying to get quantity or I'm trying to experience quality. Just because they can happen at the same time doesn't mean I'm trying to do both. I'm always just trying to do one. Some people say they're trying to do both, but when put to the test, when they have to choose between the two, you'll see which one wins. Are they really doing it for their values? Are they willing to lose outcomes, lose achievements? Or are they really doing it for quantity? when they're willing to compromise integrity, willing to lose the satisfaction of being in the moment, willing to work hard rather than play, so to speak. Now I want to start off by saying that objectively neither of these can be seen as right or wrong, because you could make that argument for both of them. Pursuing outcomes, further achievements, you could say that's the reason for human progress. Pursuing quality and meaningful experience, you could say that's the reason for quality of life. You could argue for or against both of these, and it would be a completely subjective argument. But I want to talk about what it means to succeed or fail with these approaches, because this is where I believe the argument for quality wins in the end. And it all comes down to something called death. There's a line that stood out to me from the movie Fight Club, which is, on a long enough timeline, the survival rate for everybody drops to 0. That's something that stuck with me really strongly from that movie. This idea that no matter how well you're doing, given enough time, you will die. And everything will die. Even if you're working hard to leave a legacy behind, even if you're busting your ass, in the quantity side of things, so that you'll be remembered, so that you'll have an impact on the world. These are all quantity measurements. Eventually, that impact will be forgotten, and your memory will be forgotten, and everything will go to dust, eventually. It's the scientific law of entropy. You leave our planet alone for long enough, everything in it's going to die. And we're no different. The human race will go extinct one day. The sun will go out. So no matter how big an impact you have, and no matter how much stuff you accumulate, and no matter how many wins you get under your belt, it will all be forgotten one day. You will die one day. Which means if your pathway is the accumulation of stuff and the accumulation of crossing finish lines, this quantity, on a long enough timeline, the only final result is failure, because you die and because you're forgotten. You could sleep with all the women in the world, you'll still die. So if there was no meaning in that experience, your final score is 0. You can accumulate all the money in the world. Do you take it with you after you die? No. It stays behind. You lose it all. You end up at 0. You can get the fittest, most buff-looking body in the whole world. You can look fucking awesome. You get old enough, no matter how much plastic surgery you get, you're going to look like shit. Or you're going to die looking young. Either way, 0. Now the quality measurement's different, because the quality measurement isn't about how I end up. It's about how I'm doing right now, which can be a range of scores. If, for example, I decide that being meaningful means living with integrity, and I have a clear set of principles about what living with integrity is, the only measurement that matters is whether or not I'm doing it right now. How well I do in the future or how well I did in the past, irrelevant. Time is not a measurement in a quality world, but time is always a measurement in a quantity world. How do you end up at the end is the measurement of quantity. But the measurement of quality is how are you doing right now. So if, for example, I decide that a meaningful life for me means being honest, even if I have to sacrifice quantity, wins and achievements to do so, then I can be honest any moment I want and I win. Straight away, right there in that moment, I win. I don't need to hold on to it. I don't need to put it in the bank. I don't need anybody else to confirm it. I don't need it written on my gravestone. I don't need my children to remember it. I don't need to have an impact on the world. I get to have the win right here, right now. No one can take it away from me. And yet in a weird way, in the same moment, it's only a brief win. And then I'm on to the next moment, where I get to win or lose by this new standard, fail or succeed, you might say. Now I can have a lot of wins in the quantity department, but I always end up losing. I end up with death, entropy, decay, forgotten. Whereas in the quality, I can have win after win after win, and the moment I die, nothing matters. There's no loss because the game's over. One of the ways I look at it is the quantity way of living things, trying to achieve stuff, trying to collect stuff, trying to be remembered and have an impact, all this quantity stuff. It's like playing a video game. You're controlling the character, but you're not in the game. You're just all about control, accumulation of points. And eventually you clock the game, aka you die, and it's game over. Whereas quality is more like being the character in the game. You're experiencing the whole game, you're winning the whole time. When the game's over, it doesn't matter. You had your chance, you experienced it. All those experiences were wins in themselves. To be completely honest, I'm not entirely sure exactly what it is I'm trying to say here. Other than I have made the switch from quantity to quality in my life. My old life was about getting as laid as many times as possible with girls that were as beautiful as possible. It was about collecting as much money as possible and getting paid more and more. It was about getting promotions at work. It was about being seen as a cooler, funnier, better guy all the time. I didn't call it self-development, I called it self-improvement. It was constantly about getting better, higher levels. If I started a new hobby, I had to be the best at it. And there was very little enjoyment of the process in that life. And when I did accomplish something, it wasn't the finish. There had to be a next thing. You know, I'd get into a relationship, and now the relationship had to be awesome. I'd get a promotion, now I had to get the next promotion. I would earn some money, now I have to earn some more money. I can never cross the finish line, really. So I'm constantly chasing something that's in front of me, like a carrot dangling in front of me. I've since made the switch, or tried my best to make the switch, to where it's about how I behave in the moment is all that matters. If I'm living my life in a true, real way, by my own standards, by my principles and values, I win. It's like I'm sitting there eating the carrot rather than chasing it. And if I forego my values and integrity, then I learn. And that's also a win. And I really do feel that way. I feel like days go by and it doesn't matter what I accumulate. It doesn't matter if my bank account's full or empty. It doesn't matter if people love or hate me. It doesn't matter if I'm fat or thin. I'm either winning or learning. I'm constantly winning. It feels that way. It really does. I don't think I could go back to quantity anymore. And for all of you out there on the quantity side of things, what I'd suggest is, if this is not satisfactory for you, if you feel like the life you want is on the horizon rather than where you are, I guarantee you that feeling's not going to change, because there's always a new horizon. With quantity, there's always more. There's always better. You'll never catch up. But if you start to think about quality, how can I make it that there's no difference between being a multi-millionaire CEO and being homeless, where the quality of life could be the same for both of those people? If I could figure out what that secret is. You know, if you start asking yourself that question, then you don't need to win and achieve anymore in that quantitative way. And you're not restricted by other people's decisions and opinions, and by fate and by injuries and by bad luck and all those things that affect quantity. You're only affected, in quality world, you're only affected by your own decisions. That's the only thing that makes a difference to whether or not you win. It's just a thought I wanted to share. If you're someone who wants to make the switch from quantity to quality, but you don't know how, like you get it, but in real life practical application it just doesn't work out that way, you're always so needy for those wins, then get in touch with me, dan@brojo.co.nz. We'll find a way to help you make that breakthrough. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, share it around, get me some of that quantity if you thought it was quality. And I'll see you guys next time.